Hello, I'm Raider Pilot Steve, and welcome to another museum review on this channel. This will, like before, follow a similar format to my airshow reviews, but with more of a focus on the individual stories and histories of the aircraft on show. My major interest is the preserved aircraft, and so I will primarily focus on these for this review. This time, I went to a museum that I have never been to before, the Gatwick Aviation Museum, which is situated very close to Gatwick Airport. This museum was founded in 1987 as a private collection by local businessman Peter Vallance. By 1990, it was decided to establish the museum as a charity and open it up to the public. This museum started small, but is now home to a good number of Cold War era aircraft and cockpits, which reside both in a hangar space and outside. There is also a large number of engines and other aviation items on display inside the hangar, which I won't cover in detail here, but can be viewed on my Instagram page, linked in the description below. This museum is pretty good value for money, as one adult ticket was £12.50. It also has a lovely little gift shop and a cafe, which all helps raise money for the museum and its exhibits. The outside space also extends out to a section of the outer perimeter of Gatwick Airport, which makes this a great place for aircraft spotting, no matter where you go on the grassland. The outside area was also a lovely place for a picnic, especially on a hot and sunny day. I will cover some of my spotting exploits later in this review. As I was a first-time visitor, one of their friendly volunteers took me to the first room, which showcases the history of Gatwick Airport and contains several interesting artefacts. There was also a room that plays a film about the Avro Shackleton at regular intervals. After this, I was on my way to explore the rest of the museum site. There was no particular order in which to view the displays, so I will take you through in the order that I saw everything. I hope you enjoy. Starting in the hangar space in which the majority of the aircraft on display are housed. The first aircraft I saw was the museum's latest acquisition, a de Havilland DH-104 Devon C2 with the serial number VP952. This aircraft was built at Hatfield in 1947 as part of the first production batch for the Royal Air Force. It was modified from a civilian Dove and would serve as the prototype Devon C1. It would go on to serve in the communications role with a variety of squadrons including Transport Command, Allied Air Force Europe, Bomber Command and the Metropolitan Communications Squadron. In 1970, it was upgraded to C2 standard, which included more powerful engines and an enlarged cockpit canopy. In 1974, it transferred over to No. 207 Squadron at RAF Northolt until it was retired in 1984 when all Devon operations with the Royal Air Force ceased. Upon VP952's retirement, it was the longest serving and oldest operational aircraft within the Royal Air Force, and during its service life had accumulated over 8,500 flying hours and over 13,000 landings. It was slated for preservation and would eventually be displayed at the RAF Museum at Cosford, where it mostly resided in Hangar 1, but would occasionally be brought outside for static display at the RAF Cosford Air Show, where I saw it in 2018 and 2019. In August 2025, VP952 arrived at the Gatwick Aviation Museum via road, and it is currently displayed in the main hangar space. The next aircraft is a true piece of British naval aviation history, the Hawker Seahawk FB5 with the serial number XE489. This aircraft is actually a composite of two different Seahawks. The majority of this aircraft is XE489, but the rear fuselage belongs to WM983. The majority of WM983 with the rear fuselage of XE489 is on display at the Militaire Luchtvaart Museum in the Netherlands. This aircraft was delivered to the Royal Navy in 1956 and actually served with squadrons aboard HMS Eagle in 1956 to 57. By 1961 she became part of the Fleet Requirements Unit. XE489 retired from active service and was moved to the Historic Aircraft Museum in Southend by 1967. She was registered as G-JETH, where she was bought by Michael Carton's Jet Heritage. It was intended to return her to flight, but this project didn't come to fruition with the owner's death. In 1987, she was sold to the Gatwick Aviation Museum, where she spent many years outdoors, but now has been fully restored and displayed inside. Moving onwards was the iconic British jet, the Gloucester Meteor. This example is a T7 trainer variant with the serial number VZ638, which was delivered to the Royal Air Force in 1949. It would operate with a range of different squadrons including numbers 500, 25, 54, 85 and 501 squadrons, and later with 237 Operational Conversion Unit and the College of Air Warfare. It retired from active service in 1958 and was stored for many years at RAF Kemble. She was then purchased in 1972 and moved to the British Historical Air Museum at Southend Airport. By 1983 the museum had closed down due to financial issues, and VZ638 passed through multiple owners in places such as Southampton, Herne and North Weald, and by this time was registered as G-JETM. In 1988 she was purchased by Peter Vallance and moved to the Gatwick Aviation Museum, where she still remains on display today. She is currently marked in a striking red and black scheme that depicts a Royal Navy aircraft from Halfar, Malta station flight. Another iconic British jet design was the twin-boom de Havilland DH-112 Venom FB50 with the serial number J1605. This example first flew in 1955 and served with the Swiss Air Force until its retirement in 1984, at which point it had accrued over 1,600 flight hours. It was then acquired by a private owner and moved to Duxford. By 1991, this aircraft was acquired by the Gatwick Aviation Museum, where it is now displayed and is currently undergoing extensive restoration work. Next was another jet with a twin-boom design, the de Havilland DH-110 Sea Vixen TT2, with the serial number XS587. This jet was initially built as an FAW-2 and first took to the air in 1965 and was soon delivered to the Royal Navy and served with 899 Naval Air Squadron based at RNAS Yeovilton. She was retired from frontline service in 1972 and was then converted to a TT2 variant for the target tug role with the Royal Air Force. When performing these duties, XS587 operated out of Tarrant Rushden Airfield. She retired fully and made her final flight midway through 1984 and would later be bought by Michael Carlton. She was registered as G-VIXN with the intention of her flying under civilian ownership, but this never came to pass due to Michael's death. She was then purchased by Peter Vallance and transferred over to the Gatwick Aviation Museum, where she still resides today. XS587 is the last target tug variant of the Sea Vixen left in the world, and is still painted in the striking paint scheme that she wore during her time as a target tug aircraft. Something a bit different was the small collection of preserved cockpit sections, the first of which was an English electric Canberra B2 with the serial number WK146. This particular Canberra had a remarkably short flying career, having been delivered to the Royal Air Force in 1954 and then put into storage at No. 15 Maintenance Unit at RAF Rawton after just 3 years. It was then sold and scrapped in 1967, with the nose section being saved and taken to RAF Abingdon, where it was used for ground instruction for a few years. WK146 was purchased by Peter Vallance and was put on display at the museum by 2000, where she remains today. Next, a true icon of British engineering and ingenuity. This was the Hawker Siddeley Harrier GR3 with the serial number XV751. This jump jet was initially built as a GR1 and first flew in 1969 and was then quickly delivered to the Royal Air Force. By 1974, she was upgraded to GR3 standard and went on to serve with No. 3 F Squadron by 1979, then No. 1 F Squadron until about 1982, and then it returned to No. 3 F Squadron where it remained until the squadron switched over to the newer GR5 variant. After retiring from flying around 1989, she moved to Lyon-Solent in 1990, where she was used for ground instruction with the serial A2760 and later on A2672. She served this role until 1995, when she was struck off charge and acquired by the museum, where she was put on display as a long-term restoration project. In 2008, she was repainted in her former No. 3 F Squadron colours and is still being restored further. The next cockpit on display was the English Electric Lightning F-53 with the serial 53-700. This was the final Lightning to be built off the production line. This jet was built to replace a Royal Saudi Air Force Lightning that was lost and was delivered to Saudi Arabia in 1972. This aircraft retired to Warton Aerodrome in 1986 with the serial ZF589 and was later acquired by Marine Salvage and stored at Stretton in 1997. The cockpit section was cut horizontally and became one of 5 cockpits used in the filming of the film Wing Commander in 1999. When it was no longer needed for filming, the cockpit was disposed of at a paintball park at Bricket Wood, where it remained lost for years. In 2016, it was finally rediscovered, covered in layers of green paint under trees, when photos of it appeared on Facebook. It was later purchased by David Tiley, who moved it and began restoring her over a period of years. By 2021, David put 53-700 on display at the museum. Just across from the cockpit was a fully intact English Electric Lightning F-53. This one has the serial 53-671 and is maintained in ground running condition. This aircraft first flew in 1967 and was soon delivered to the Royal Saudi Air Force. In 1986 she was bought back by BAE Systems and returned to RAF Warton and given the serial ZF573. Just like 53-700, 53-671 was sold to Marine Salvage in 1997 and also stored at Stretton. She was purchased by the Gatwick Aviation Museum in 2000 and began the long restoration process to get her back to ground running condition. In 2016, this was achieved and she became the world's only operational Lightning F-53. She is painted in Saudi markings minus a few religious icons, and I hope to return to see her run her engines here in the future. Another relatively new exhibit at the museum was the Sepicat Jaguar GR1 with the serial number XX967. It first flew in late 1975 and was then delivered to the Royal Air Force in early 1976. She served with No. 14 Squadron based at RAF Bruggen in Germany until 1985, when the squadron re-equipped with the Panavia Tornado GR1s, and XX967 was put into storage at RAF Shawbury. Having retired from active service, in 1989 she was moved to RAF Cosford for the ground instructional role with No. 2 School of Technical Training. By 2023 she was moved outside with other Jaguar airframes as she was no longer used for ground instruction and awaiting disposal. In 2024, XX967 was acquired by the Gatwick Aviation Museum via a donation from RAF Heritage. She is now on display and will remain as an exhibition aircraft as the conditions of the donation prevent her from being restored to ground running condition. Next up was another iconic British aircraft design, the Hawker Hunter. This example is a T7 trainer variant with the serial number XL591 and first flew in 1958 and delivered to the Royal Air Force shortly afterwards. She served with several flying schools under the Central Fighter Establishment and later with No. 4 Flying Training School and No. 208 Squadron until she was retired from active service in 1991. She went through several private owners before being acquired by the Gatwick Aviation Museum by 2000. In her early days as a museum exhibit, her condition wasn't great, but was repainted into her former No. 4 Flying Training School colours in 2007. With the new hangar erected, she moved undercover and was repainted further in 2017 and further restoration works are still underway. The last cockpit on display belonged to a Britten-Norman BN2 Islander, a type that was quite common in the early days of Gatwick Airport, as the early models of the Islander were handled there. I am not sure of the specific ID of this aircraft or its history, but if you happen to know, please let me know and I'll post an update video. The final aircraft on display in the hangar was a Robinson R-22 Beta training helicopter. This particular helicopter was built in 1987 and was at some point put out on display at the Royal Air Force Museum in Hendon until it was put into storage around 2014. It was acquired by the Gatwick Aviation Museum in 2020 and is opened up to enable visitors to climb inside, though it was admittedly far too tight of a squeeze for me. Moving on to the exhibits outside, it was hard to ignore the large General Electric CF6 engine as I made my way to the outside area. The first aircraft I came across was the Blackburn Buccaneer S1 with the serial number XN923, which first flew in 1962 and was only the second production S1 built. It had a brief period with 700Z Naval Air Squadron, which is the Royal Navy's trial squadron, as well as the Aeroplane and Armament Experimental Establishment. She was then transferred to the Royal Air Force establishment at Farnborough, where she carried out test and development work, where the detachable nose cone was used to fit various equipment. XN923 was retired from test duties in 1977 and was moved to the dump at Boscombe Down in 1986, where a lot of damage and corrosion was caused due to being exposed to the elements and being moved out of the way without any due care or attention. Fortunately, she was moved to the Gatwick Aviation Museum in 1990. Work got underway to restore XN93 to ground running condition, and this occurred in 1999, making it the only operational Buccaneer S1 in the world. Due to the COVID pandemic and other setbacks, she has been left outside and looks somewhat worse for wear and will hopefully soon be brought back to her former glory. The second aircraft outside was the Percival P-57 Sea Prince T1 with the serial number WP308. It was built in 1952 and would serve with 750 Naval Air Squadron at RNAS Culdrose from 1958 until 1979, when it was withdrawn from active service. It would then be moved over to Kemble and put into storage, and later would be moved over to Gloucestershire and was given the new registration G-CA-CA. WP308 was then moved to the Gatwick Aviation Museum in late 1989, where she has remained ever since. She could definitely do with some care, as being exposed to the elements has certainly deteriorated her paintwork. Finally, the last aircraft on display outside, and my personal favourite, was the Avro Shackleton MR3 with the serial number WR982 and is currently one of only two ground-running Shackletons in the UK. This Shackleton first flew in 1956 and was retained by Avro for development work before being allocated to the Royal Air Force in 1958. It would serve with various squadrons during its service life, including numbers 206, 203, 120 and 201 squadrons until it was retired in 1970. That same year, it was flown into RAF Cosford for use as a ground instruction airframe with No. 2 School of Technical Training and given the serial 8106M. In 1988, she was put up for sale by the Ministry of Defence and was purchased by Peter Vallant and moved to the Gatwick Aviation Museum, where she was restored into ground-running condition. WR982 is in remarkably good condition despite being kept outside, and it is possible to go inside for an extra fee and subject to volunteer availability, which I will do next time I am able to visit. The museum also runs her engines on occasion, so keep an eye out for events. I know I will. Whilst I was in the outside space, it would have been pretty stupid to not get a bit of aircraft spotting in, which is something I've never really done. I don't even have a scanner. On the day I went, the airline has taken off could be seen and photographed very clearly from pretty much anywhere, but there is also a dedicated spotting area with seating and shelter right on the fence line of Gatwick Airport. If you are a fan of spotting, then this is a pretty good spot to do it, in my opinion. Aircraft are taken off incredibly frequently, and I saw a variety of aircraft I don't normally see, including Airbus A319s, A320s, A321s, A350s, and ATR 72, Boeing 737s, 777s, and 787 Dreamliners, all from a variety of different operators, with EasyJet, Ryanair, and British Airways being the most frequently seen. I'd also like to point out that the green space outside of the main museum is a very nice spot for a picnic, especially on a hot and sunny day like when I visited. But do purchase food from the museum cafe to support the museum further. In conclusion, I had a fantastic day at the Gatwick Aviation Museum and seeing all of the British aircraft on display. My particular favourites were the Shackleton, Sea Vixen, and Seahawk. The museum clearly cares for these aircraft really well and present them in an appealing way. The museum also has a very large collection of engines and an excellent exhibit of Gatwick Airport's history. I would definitely recommend to visit this museum, especially if you're a fan of British jet designs or just want another area to do some spotting. The museum itself is very good value and the volunteers were very friendly and welcoming. The cafe and gift shop were also well stocked and every purchase helped support the museum further. If you enjoyed this video, please consider visiting the Gatwick Aviation Museum, as seeing everything for yourself is far better than just seeing photos or videos of the exhibits. Thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe as any support is greatly appreciated. I hope you join me in the next one. Bye.